No, no.
Well, we do live on Kauai, and there are limited cards if you think about it.
Right. So a few
Anyway, a
announcements.
few announcements. Sunday, I think you're not coming, but pretty much everybody in here otherwise.
not
Oh, you're
coming.
not coming. So anyway, we're having our first service, and there's enough people, we can't take any more anyway. So that's happening there. But if you want to come the next week, make your reservation. And we are going to be starting Walt Weiss. Do you want to tell them about it, as long as you're here?
Yeah, that would be great. But can you do me a favor? And I'm going to.
I am going to be continuing with the revolutionary agreements with the second pillar on acceptance, and we are starting that on Monday, July the 13th, okay, at 6 o'clock here at the center. So I'm hoping that people who have taken it, the first pillar, will join in, but you don't have to have taken the first pillar to begin the second section. So I will say more on Sunday, but that's...
Very cool. All right, so that's happening in July. And then we're teaching a one-nighter called Money is God in Action by Raymond Charles Barker.
Oh my God, this book is so great.
Yeah, it's this little teeny book. We just ordered it. And Reverend Diana's...
He's the same one that did the.
He's the same one that did the Power of Decision.
Power of Decision. So he's.
It's the 16th. It's just one night. And then Reverend Diana's doing a one-nighter on the 23rd. She's doing a creativity evening with visioning.
Visioning.
Yeah, and that's all I think that we're going to do in July, other than our movie, which we don't know what that is yet. So we're just kind of go locate in July, take some time to plan our fall, because we're going to have a big fall. So, right? Not a fall, but big fall, big autumn. No, we are not going to fall. And so before we pray in, I want to just say that we have your certificates from the last class finally, but we're not going to pass them out on Sunday because it's just too complicated to have you all lined up here with trying to keep the social distancing. So we're going to have you take them now, but we are going to announce your names, and then you can just stand up. But
You're here.
Yes. So
Yeah.
what we'll do is we'll just announce you on Sunday, and if you're here, you can stand up and take your bow. And hold on, I'll get you Lori's. What did I do with it? It's right here. It was here.
So, is anybody online?
Where's Lori's? Oh, there it is.
I haven't heard from Jamie this week. Jamie?
Yeah.
Okay, Rita.
Okay. That's done.
Yes, you do.
Okay. All right. So, and is there anything else we need to tell them?
I think that is it for
Oh.
the moment.
We are looking for office help.
Oh, yeah. What we're going to
I'm
do
going
is...
to get totally organized, and we
Well-
need somebody that will work alongside me that could possibly work. So if you know anybody that could possibly work into a paying position, but not right now.
Actually, it's going to be working upon us because, but right now we cannot afford at this moment administrators. So I said that was really all we have to do is get about 3 or 4 people that can. We don't know yet. We'll send out. But if you are interested, then we'll go ahead and put out that list. I know that, and you don't have to do it here, all of it, unless it's shredding or something. Then you do have, because we have a lot of 7 years of shredding. We're kind of like upgrading this whole system, and we have a big thing happening in September that we'll tell you all about later. A new plan for CSL Kauai. As far as education and stuff like that. So it's very cool. And we also, in February, are having the big event that they're kicking off their
CSL,
convention.
the international organization.
They do one in person, and obviously this is a good year, and one online. So
You ran out of battery.
they're out. So it's a bigger deal than we've been making it. But what it is that the Edward Villun, who's the new spiritual leader, is coming here, and so is the other little wonderful bigwig, Sonia, who we knew from the Sacred Journey. Anyway, they're all coming here. We're hoping to get Sabra. We did get her, and she's going to be doing the opening. We're going to have and it's all, they know our space. but there's about 8 of them flying in, and this is going to be, the
It's going
kickoff.
to be live streamed worldwide from here.
Right.
Yay.
Yeah. So it's a bit
They're
exciting.
featuring our center.
Yeah.
The 15th. It's just
15th.
one day. It's going to be in the afternoon because I think I don't know the exact time yet.
Like
but
4, probably.
Probably 3 or
so.
4 or something.
So anyway, so the big event. We'll have a party for them, and so everybody we'll be
know
hosting
that we're
them.
all
of us will
through
be
this
hosting
whole
them.
thing by then.
And if it's not, then it's up to them.
not, they won't be
It's up to
coming.
them. And so they're coming. They're not asking us to put out money or anything. They're coming. They want to feature, and they also want to feature. They don't have a lot of couples that are running centers too. So that's another opportunity for us to kind of be on the map. We've spent so much time, just to be honest, building and growing this center that we really haven't been, the pulse on the organization. And they've kind of like left us alone. They know what we're doing. I mean, they check us out, but this is an opportunity. I think it's Sonia is really the one that pushed it to say, you guys have done some really great stuff here. The organization needs to know it. The convention needs to know it. And so this will be kind of a nice little coming out after 7
Yeah,
years.
And they want the choir. If
They want the
if
choir,
fit some of
Sacred
the choir.
Earth, they want-
Sacred Earth. Yeah, it'll be cool.
And they,
It'll be great.
So it'll be fun.
Yay. Okay. Am I treating it?
Sure.
Okay. So we might be few in numbers right now, but we are not few in minds. We have one beautiful, amazing intelligence, one mind, one spirit that connects everything and all of us. And whether we're here or not, we are connected in that space, in that field of intelligence. I know that. And I know that that divine intelligence, that power, that energy, that source, that wisdom is what we bring here tonight as we gather and study and speak and listen and share this beautiful, amazing thing called the New Thought Movement, and all the great teachers and mystics and healers that have come before us that are just inspiring us already in so many ways. So I'm grateful for this evening. I'm grateful to have Reverend Walt Weiss joining us, and for all the beautiful information that we received tonight, knowing it's perfect for each of us and expands each of us in the most amazing way. So I give thanks for it in advance. I know it's perfect. I know it's unfolding moment by moment by moment in all its glory and amazingness. And I just let it be so as I say, and so it is. Okay, so we're going to turn the time over to, well, I want to call you doctor. See, you're on your way, Reverend Doctor. He's getting his doctorate. Do you know, does everybody know Reverend Walt? You know that he's one of the leaders at hospice and wonderful divine science. But he's going to talk to us about divine science, and I'm really grateful to have him here. Yeah, let's bring it. Yeah.
Can I have till about 4:00?
You-
Does that work for you?
Yeah, you can have a whole half hour.
Okay.
All right. You're bringing us something.
early evening time, you guys. I know seeing, believe it.
I'm going to be taking notes. Well, I'll have the video.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, in case you wonder if anybody's having a problem, they've been camping. Oh, it's rain up there.
Oh.
Lord.
Well, I am so grateful for being here. And, you guys have been studying New Thought now for how many weeks?
This is our 7th week.
Okay. So, I wanted to start out by saying, that old expression, behind every great man is a woman. I don't know if that sounds too feminist or chauvinistic or whatever. Here it might be beside every great man is a woman.
I like that.
Okay. But I have a dear friend, kind of a new friend, who has written a wonderful book called Courage, Conviction, and Consciousness. 365 days of inspiration from the women of New Thought. And dear Ernest, who adorns the wall in the back, we often talk about, the divine masculine and how often God gets referred to as he, and how many men were, influencing our religious thinking. But I have to tell you, Spirit, God, divine, the universe, used a whole lot of women to get him to where he is so that we can be where we're at. So if you get a chance, if it's like a little daily devotional thing. But anyway, so you kind of had Mary Baker Eddy, right, and the First Church of Christ Scientist, okay, and then Emma Curtis Hopkins kind of hooked up with her until she got Mary Baker Eddy miffed at something she wrote. So then Emma Curtis Hopkins was on her own. So she's in Chicago, right? So then you've got this lady named Mrs. Bingham. I'm sorry I can't remember her first name, but she's out in Colorado. And she can't have kids. She's having trouble getting pregnant, and the doctors can't figure out what to do, so they decide to send her to a specialist in Chicago they also can't seem to figure out what's going on. But while she's there, somebody says, oh, you should meet Emma Curtis Hopkins. And after spending several weeks with her, she goes back to Colorado and is like, really well, so she starts meeting with her friends, and they all, are like loving this kind of new way of thinking about spiritual things, okay? And some sisters show up, Nona Brooks, Fannie James, and Smith, what is her first name? The other sister. And they all are just, they're taking the information that Emma Curtis Hopkins put together, but kind of distilling it in just a little bit different way, and making it, fit for them. But they didn't quite have a name for this, right? And it's kind of like they've came up with a recipe for this favorite dessert that they were serving all of their friends, right? And they all loved the dessert, but they didn't quite, know what to call it, And then along comes Melinda Kramer, okay, and visits the Denver area, and then they all start meeting together. And Melinda, who was calling hers divine science, or maybe she was calling her dessert cheesecake, right? And these other ladies are just calling it dessert, but they compared recipes, and it was the exact same thing. And it tasted the same, and everybody loved it the same. So Nona Brooks and her sisters go to Melinda, so can we call ours cheesecake too? And that's how they decided to all get together and call it divine science. Is that a weird analogy about cheesecake recipes? Spirit gave me that as I was driving here. It was just like, I never thought of it that way before. But anyway, so the founders,
Cheesecake of Kauai.
right, And Melinda Kramer had been an invalid, for over 23 years. And then one morning, she had this kind of revelation. And so I'll just read this to you. She said, it was early one morning in the year 1885, during an hour of earnest meditation and prayerful seeking, that I asked the following questions in faith, believing that they would be answered with a willingness to abide the decision, whatever it might be. Is there any way out of these conditions? Is there any power in the vast universe that can heal me? The answer to my earnest inquiry was an absorbing realization of a presence not heretofore realized. This presence was more than personal. It was omnipresence, and was so real and so vivifying and illumining that I became it. I realized it to be my life, my being, my health, knowledge, and power. It was a consuming fire, in that all things became it, and were this presence manifested. That hour was the beginning of my realization of the oneness of life, for a gleam of its truth flashed across my mental vision at that time, which I now understand to be the at-one-ment of the whole, of the Creator and creation. I know we're reading the stuff that was written in the 1880s, and the language sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? You know, but the essence beneath that, you know, was that she and all of these other women had realized that this thing we call God was everywhere and was in us. And therefore, if God is everywhere and in us, then all that is God's, is ours, and that we have access to that. And so thus started, you know, the very beginnings of New Thought, okay? And so, yes, I am ordained in divine science because the church that I attended in Fort Lauderdale, one of the senior minister was actually also ordained in divine science, and that church has become since a school for divine science ministers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. I just wanted to ask, has anybody in here ever read any divine science literature? Okay. And so what I thought I would just do tonight, you know, I had visions when they first asked me this that I was going to have this really fabulous PowerPoint presentation with religious science on one side and divine science on the other, and, you know, comparing and contrasting. But you know what? There isn't that much difference. I'll talk a little bit about the treatment part, you know. I spoke to a gentleman in Pueblo, Colorado yesterday because I read in his bio that he was ordained in both divine science and religious science. Sean Furlong, I think his name was. And it was a really great video chat. The thing about divine science is I think that it is very much centered in God, the Bible, and Jesus. You know, it was really very much about that. So in all of the devotional stuff that I have from divine science, it starts with a verse of Scripture, okay? And not to make it as if one doesn't exist in the other, but I think that divine science was very much about in the heart, in the chest. And Ernest Holmes was a little bit more, I think, psychological, in the mind, and not that there was no heart in religious science, and not that there is no mind in divine science, but if you had to ask me what I saw as the difference, it's kind of that dividing line, and I'll share a few other nuances. So let me read for you the divine science statement of being. And you've probably heard me say some of these words when I give a treatment on Sundays, you know. But God is both invisible and visible. One presence, one mind, one power is all. This one that is all is perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. We are the individualized expressions of God and are ever one with this perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. Sound like you've heard me say that before? Yeah, so when I treat, I often use divine science wording in that. in talking about that omnipresence. And one of the principles of divine science basically is God is all. God is omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, and omniactive. God is manifest in all of creation. God is all there is. That's a divine science principle, okay? And so what does divine science teach? A divine scientist believes that there are universal spiritual laws. If we live in harmony with these laws, we experience harmony in our lives. Because God gave us conscious wisdom and plain good sense to use in every aspect of our lives, especially our religious beliefs, we never expect blind faith from someone who has become interested in our teachings. We just ask people to try these ideas. And for example, divine science doesn't believe in hell or eternal damnation, even though I said it talks a lot about Jesus and the Bible, okay? How could a God of love create such a place? If God, the good, is everywhere, where could hell exist? The only hell that exists is in the state of mind where negative thoughts and emotions reign supreme. Why does God allow terrible things to happen? We have all been given free will, and that includes the freedom to misuse our opportunities and abilities. But even when we misuse them, God's unconditional love is still ours. We are never punished for our sins. We are punished by them. And I might not even use the word sin, but anyway, by the things that we do. Negative acts simply have negative results. And then finally, our goal is to have an ever-deepening sense of our oneness with God that leads to the experience of illumination, directly knowing God. We will come to see the world and everything in it as God in action, a divine process toward greater order and good, and each will be participants in knowing it. I don't think I've said anything that sounds that different from what we hear week after week here, you know? Yeah.
I'm hearing the same exact thing. But yeah, it is. Cause and effect is the one you just read. No, not the sin. The sin is a quote from that Ernest Holmes used, but who knows what it is.
Yeah, but he was quoting divine science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what they're all doing. They're all pulling from, and he is one at least that said he was. He said I was pulling from everything.
Yeah,
But I think your cause and effect, the same cause and effect, was by the last statement. I don't know what you said, but I went, oh, that must be cause and effect.
Yeah. And maybe someday I will expand this to actually have, you know, what Ernest Holmes said on one side, you know. But just for me, I will tell you that since I started coming here, I haven't read any divine science stuff. I've only been reading kind of, you know, other New Thought teachers, and it was really just so wonderful for me to go back and read this stuff, because it was the first time I heard it. I had never been to a CSL, you know. I was going to gay church, you know. So what I wanted to do, and it's hard for me to do this with a microphone in my hand, but
You need us to hold it or anything?
I want to just read. I want to read from a little devotional book that I have. Okay, and this is not a treatment, but it's kind of a self-prayer, a self-treatment. And so this book is by a guy named Erwin Gregg, okay? And it always starts out with a verse of scripture, and then it says here, and I have crossed out every he, every himself, you know, and written in it. But God is the truth, substance, and meaning of life. God is the mind that knows through my God is the mind that knows through my oneness with this mind, I am instructed, inspired, and directed. So these things always start off with kind of this guidance that I just know. I am given the information that I need to know, whether you call that inspiration or guidance. And then it always talks about perfect health. God is the pure life of being, the ageless, deathless, diseaseless life of God's pure being surges through my soul, body, and perfect health is mine. Okay? And again, you may have heard some of these in my treatments, right? And then God is the consciousness of all sufficiency in all things. And this consciousness operating through me is my consciousness of all sufficiency in all things. This just happens to be the one, I read one every day for a whole week and then go on. But so those ideas of God, of healing, and supply. I thought that I would just read a little bit of what some of the writers of divine science have said about that. First of all, about the omnipresence of God. I accept omnipresence without any reserve. Since God is all there is, no place for anything adverse to God. There is no place for sin, sickness, or death in God's presence, and that presence is all. It says, this was written by, some people call her Daisy, Mrs. C.L. Baum. Again, very much the time you wouldn't see Mrs. on a title of a book, but she was one of the big writers. And she said, in divine science, the term omnipresence is used more than any other word, and it is really the foundation principle of all our work. Whether we use the term omnipresence to mean to convey to the student the eternal fact of the all-inclusive, all-pervading, all-infilling, all-sustaining life, which man has pleased to call or name God. The substance of this one who is all is spirit. Its activity is life. Its attributes are love, wisdom, joy, peace, wholeness, and perfection. But then, again, all of the writings, and Ernest Holmes does this, but a little bit, I think, less intentional and more tangentially. This thought is based on the verse in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 6 that says, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. Okay? And there's another one that we use here all the time. In him or in God, we live and move and have our being, right? Well, that's from the book of Acts, chapter 17, verse 28. But a lot of us don't even know that it's quoting the Bible, okay? And the Apostle Paul was actually quoting a poet of the time when he wrote that. Nona Brooks wrote a wonderful book called Mysteries. And I want to read what she says about God. How shall we look at God? With the eyes of spirit? How shall we think of God? As universal expansion? Yes, this is easy, but I am making a special plea to all of us to acknowledge God in all our ways, in all expression, to accustom ourselves to the concept of the nearness of God, to the immediacy of the presence of perfection. When we look at the objects around us, at our bodies, at all nature, let us see to it that the wrong conception shall not dominate, but this we shall perceive with inner vision, only intelligent, loving, powerful, harmonious activity, God in action. God is all, both visible and invisible. Let us see as God sees, God sees by the understanding of his love. He knows reality and never swerves. He sees you and me as perfect expressions of his own idea. God sees us as living soul. He sees our bodies as form, his own substance in action. Our lives are in God. I want to read a couple of things then about healing. And I will tell you, and I've said this to Rita and Patrick before, healing is one of those things that I really struggle with. As a person with a medical background who has written prescriptions when people, and so I'm still working on that one, but that healing is more the state of mind than it is about what's happening in the body, And so this is what Nona Brooks wrote about the mystery of healing. Divine science is revealing to us two things. First, that healing is not a physical process, but spiritual realization. And second, that health is not a condition of physical well-being only, but the realization of a state of wholeness in the individual. Healing is the turning from the belief in disease to the realization of God's presence and perfect activity. God is health. Divine science sees God's creation like its creator, eternally perfect and untouched by human thought. The creation of God is eternal. The misconception about it's temporal. Spirit is always expressing in terms of perfection. There is nothing that needs healing in God life. Where God is, their substance is whole and perfect. God is in all places at all times. There is no place where God is not. What is it, then, that is ill and sinful? It is only our thought of the body. It is not the body, the temple of the living God. And remember, there is only one body, the God body. Divine science knows one substance, spirit, and one mind, universal intelligence. You and I are included in this mind. All that we see with true vision of spirit brought forth. So I'm still working on.
It's interesting that you would say that confusing, because the only confusion I had was the one before I looked at Rita and I said, there's the only difference. It was the one you read before. There was a sense of duality, a sense of he did this and he did that. And I'm saying that even though as you speak and you go underneath it, but if I were here for the first time and I was listening to that, I would go, he did this and God is this and God is that, meaning that he's separate. But then they would already probably turn the switch off. But then as you continue to read, you're saying the exact same thing. But I have a feeling, because divine science was so based in the Bible, not as the Bible as truth, as literal, thank you. I think that because I'm sitting here listening, I'm going, it was the one that he read right before that you read right before that felt like you were talking about a God outside of self, talking about what's going on. But your healing thing, which is very interesting, is the exact healing process that we use in science.
And again, we're limited in time. There's a whole bunch of stuff about non-duality.
Yeah.
Which I'm.
Let me just add one more thing, because I realized, too, that all these people were coming from Christianity.
Right.
And they were coming from a vengeful God. And they were coming from a God that, you got sick because you were being punished and all of that. And they were moving away to this loving God, this loving presence. So it makes sense to me that they would be in duality to a certain extent, because they're not where we are now. I mean, we're walking the bridge now. They just got us started.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying? And so now things are a little bit, we're walking more toward unity, toward oneness than even then. But they progressed so much coming from that horrible, vengeful, a horrible God that, judgmental God. And they were just going, no, God is love. God's this presence that's
And
everywhere.
like I said, this is 1800s, early 1900s. I'm reading this going, we are in such a totally different place now, even in our understanding. So it is, I have a hard time reading some of the stuff that Ernest Holmes says, and go, well, I don't know, today I wouldn't say that that way.
One thing on this is very exciting. You'll have your minutes after that if we take, because it's
yeah.
exciting, is that they're actually, what we've gone on these 7 weeks, including this, they really were not behind. They were not they actually already had it down. I mean, they already knew that we were God, and that we were that energy was moving through us. You just read it in your healing. It had nothing to do with the body itself. It had nothing to do with the dis-ease itself. I think what happened was it just got cut off in a certain amount of times, and then we're now bringing it back, calling it quantum physics. But they were already talking everything that we're talking about. How else would they have the healings that they had if they didn't have what you just read about healing, which was absolutely beautiful? So I think that it's interesting to watch that, they were in the 1800s, but what I'm thinking is that they knew it, and then it took us all this time to kind of get it and then blend science with it. That's where Ernest Holmes comes in. He made sure that the science was brought in, because he knew that the average person wouldn't even hear a talk if it didn't have science in it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And, I was going to say this at the end. I think that the concept of being open at the top, has allowed religious science to kind of move more, to take in quantum physics and all of that stuff. And I think that the negative, or the thing that I think has kept divine science from growing more, is that it's stuck. It got stuck there, with God, the Bible, and Jesus. And their whole concept, and, again, I don't have the time to, but, they were about starting churches. And Ernest Holmes really didn't want to start church. He wanted to start a way to explain how to live this, And so I'm going to read something on supply. Okay.
The floor doesn't drop it.
Okay, I just, I don't want to I hope that this is interesting, because this is all just for Miss Emma, who called me up one day and said, can you explain the difference to me between the...
Now at the end of this is going, oh God.
Yeah. So let me just read a little bit about supply. And it relates to omnipresence. Omnipresence means the allness of God as the fullness of everything that man can conceive of as needed for his complete satisfaction. Since God is omnipresent life, health, and substance, it is possible for everyone to so demonstrate the truth that life will abound in good to a remarkable degree. The perfect health and that perfect substance will be manifested as supply. But I really like this part, and I had forgotten that this was in here, and I just wanted to read it for you because, we talk a lot about giving, about tithing, about, and I think that this is a principle that I really like. It says, supply operates according to a very simple law, the law of cooperation. It is to be found in circulation and not in accumulation, although the latter has been the basis of many a lifelong effort to supply human needs. The freedom with which you can look at your manifest supply and put it into circulation, with the conscious recognition of the fullness of the omnipresent supply from which to draw, is the law by which great success is attained. The individual is merely the activity through which God's supply comes into form for use. You are the channel for the inflow and the outflow. If you do not cooperate with the source of supply by keeping the channel open, there is positively no other means whereby perfect supply can flow through you. The law is one of eternal justice. You must do your part. When the activity of the individual soul ceases to cooperate with divine activity, circulation for that one is stopped. It is usually fear that stops the outflow. Not knowing that the omnipresent supply and believing your various possessions dependent on your own activity, you fear to give freely of what you have. I just think that's really, really, really powerful, because I find when I don't want to give, it's because I think I don't have enough, right? And when we give, there's always plenty, you know? I forget that. So anyway, so I did healing, I did supply. So there were two things that I wanted to close with. There is something that I've kind of missed about divine science that I was developing in my own. And that is the concept of going into the silence. That's a very divine science principle. And we use that terminology sometimes here, you know? We go into the silence and then we talk. You know, we do a guided meditation, or we listen to music, or we have this seed thought in our mind in the silence, you know? And we're really not silent, you know? And so, who wrote this? Okay, this is, again, Daisy Baum, her book, Individual Responsibility. And she said, you know, she had a teacher who said, now we go into the silence. And then there was all these other words, you know, and she's like, I don't get this, you know? It's like it's not really moving me. And it said, it was many years before I discovered the real nature of the silence and its helpfulness to spiritual unfoldment. All that I had been doing so industriously was only a form of meditation. And as my thought was running along at a high rate of speed, there was no silence in the whole operation. What then is the silence? Listen carefully why I tell you. It is the deep inner stillness beneath all external activity, even below the ceaseless action of thought. There are 3 activities to be quieted. First, all bodily activity by perfect relaxation. Next, all emotions and desires through elimination. In fact, we are to want nothing. Even the emotions of love or joy are to be at rest. And last, our thought by perfect control. Now, when we really feel very quiet and can rest in a deep sense of stillness, we are to listen with an earnest intensity in order that the indwelling Spirit may speak to us. This is a time of inner communion, not by the active method of thought, but by feeling the nearness of the Father and by resting in and trusting the divine protection. We may perhaps receive a word or just an expression that we can follow later on, or possibly a message of courage or guidance may come. At all events, when we come from this silence, we should feel refreshed and rested and no mental strain whatever. This is the true silence of the mystic, and by its practice we come into more spiritual understanding and divine power. And I want to get some more of that back into my life, you know.
We do it, I mean, not here, but I'm saying that that's a lot of our spiritual practice. I don't know what your spiritual practice is, but that's what I call spiritual practice, that silence. Yeah. We don't. But one question I would want to two questions I want to ask you. Describe to us just if you went to a Divine Science church, what it would be like from the time you walked in and then to the time you walked out.
I don't know. I've never been to one.
What do you mean? Not in Florida.
But it wasn't a Divine Science
Oh.
church, okay? It was a metropolitan community church
Okay. Well,
with outreach to the LGBT community.
Oh.
But the minister was ordained in Divine Science. And what is interesting now, I'll kind of fast forward, there, just like religious science has organizations, there is the Divine Science Federation International. And a guy by the name of Tim Stewart, Will Mercer had been president of it,
I
and
know
then
Will.
Tim Stewart. And now it looks like, because Tim, I just spoke to him this past week, he is leaving, and Darrell, my senior minister, is the vice president, and so I have a feeling that he's going to, take over that. But we did affirmative prayer. We didn't necessarily do treatments as part of the service, okay? Yeah,
Affirmative. The question that she's asking is, what's the difference between affirmative and?
kind of, I'll just give a quick one, kind of like when we do the offering here, a typical prayer in a Christian church might be something like, "Dear God, please bless these offerings and bless the giver," that these things might go on and do good things, right? Okay. But affirmative prayer says, I affirm that these gifts are blessed, and that I affirm that these things are doing good.
That's
okay?
treatment.
You're not
That's
asking.
treatment.
Yeah,
So you do treatments.
But what I'm saying is, we called it affirmative prayer.
Yeah, that's what we call it, affirmative prayer or spiritual mind
Yeah.
treatment.
And it didn't necessarily have all the steps. Yeah, and so you had two questions though.
Yeah, but you might as well go to that one because it's a flip of something else.
Okay.
It's about health.
All right. So so there is in this book how to give a treatment. Okay. So and again, I think I told about somebody that when I did my Divine Science practitioner course before I was ordained as a Divine Science minister, we used the Science of Mind book, treat, and move your feet. So this had all of the steps, and so that was how, so there's this really intermingling,
interesting, yeah.
of the two, Go ahead.
Did you know that Ernest Holmes was a Divine Science minister?
Oh, yes. And,
Right.
I forgot, when I was talking, but do you know who ordained him? I have that little piece of little trivia here. Agnes J. Gaylor, Galer. And, or Galler, whatever. She lived from 1860 to 1939. And she was ordained by Nona Brooks in 1907 and established the Divine Science Church and School in Seattle, Washington. And she is the person who ordained Ernest Holmes in Divine Science in July of 1918. Yeah. So, and she was in this book, so I wanted to, so lastly, I just will, how to give a treatment, okay? Sit quietly and dismiss as far as possible all thought regarding external appearances. In order that our thought may be concentrated, we close our eyes and give ourselves up to the conscious realization of the divine presence everywhere. First, or step one, we recognize the one that is omnipresent as perfect substance and life. Next, we see this one that is all as the substance, life, health, and strength of the individual you may be treating, who, not knowing the truth of his or her own divine nature, needs to be awakened. Third, we see the unreality, the untruth, and the delusion of all sickness, disease, sorrow, and sin. And last, we declare the truth for him or her until fully conscious of it in our own thought. And finally, we rejoice and give thanks that he or she was whole and well even before we spoke the healing word. So it's
third sort of like a denial, sort of like
that yeah. And so, again, that's not so different.
And obviously,
But what I said is, because Rita said, can you do a divine science treatment? Because I was trained to do it basically, and you guys helped to fine tune it for me. I don't know that I could go back and, but again, whenever I would be asked to lead prayers at Sunshine Cathedral, we would always do affirmative prayers. We never did, petitions or begging, that kind of thing. And so the last thing is, so where I think divine science is going, there is no big emphasis on building churches anymore. Maybe there's 10 churches that are affiliated with divine science in the United States and maybe 3 overseas. But there has been a real kind of online presence. And my senior pastor, Andriello, the whole COVID thing has really, changed a lot of things. And even though their services were, he now has like 30,000 followers every Sunday watching the service, And his message is very much divine science. But if you look at it, okay, they're doing communion every week. They're wearing the robes. They're carrying the cross. It's still the gospel is read every week. So it's still God, the Bible, and Jesus. But it is applying new thought, understanding of that.
Like a lot of people say, look at Joel Osteen, and my God, it's just like science of mind. I listen to him and go, there's not anything I'm breathing in that's science of mind when I listen to Joel, except that he's positive. And that's why all of his compadres call him the devil and worshiper and all of his stuff. But I listen to him and it's just hysterical to me because it sounds like religion to me, and that Jesus is in the name of Jesus, your Savior, and that still comes out, but he's positive and he makes some jokes, and so now he's like put into like a new thought category.
If they're coming out in robes and carrying a cross, do they still have an affiliation with Jesus being the sacrifice for our sins?
Oh, absolutely not.
No. Then why do they carry the cross?
It's not a crucifix,
Okay. Okay.
I still wear a cross.
Yeah, what does it mean?
I identify, in many ways, but as a progressive Christian, a person who has found an approach to God through the life and teachings of Jesus.
We used to
Okay.
think of the cross as the connection between heaven and earth.
No,
and,
I just think of
that
I
kind
think of
thing
the
too.
cross as a symbol, and I struggle some mornings. I go, but no, this is like wearing an electric chair around your neck, and I go back and forth with that, But the cross for me is a symbol that, yes, I identify primarily with Christian teachings, I think that Jesus is a way shower. I absolutely do not, first of all, I don't believe in sin, so I don't believe in a need for sacrifice. And even when we would do communion, we would never, like in a Catholic church or, we would talk about the blood. At my church in Florida, never any blood language. Never used it. So that when we would give communion to people, We use the non-alcoholic grape juice, but I would say, may this be a reminder of the Christ within, the Christ nature within, not, the body and blood of Christ, so.
We had a discussion, and maybe this is a good time. There was a discussion where sometimes it's difficult to see Jesus Christ versus Jesus the Christ. And where is divine science in terms of that? Because I think we had a little bit of a discussion on that, and there's a difference between the two.
Okay. Kind of the way, and because of the baggage that gets associated with Christ, I sometimes have a hard time talking about my Christ consciousness, but it's my God consciousness, and what I think is that Jesus had at least from what we have been told of what Jesus said and did, that Jesus had that awareness of that God nature within him that was within all of us. So Jesus, known as the Christ, we are the Christ. We still have the Christ, that God nature. And I just think that because that word gets associated with, I don't usually use the word Christ consciousness, but it is in a lot of the literature. I know I'm over, so.
Yeah, just in closing, it's interesting because I've heard a lot of people, especially in the gay community, say that what they miss is exactly what you're talking about, is still the ritual of still having the communion. And the reason that they don't have it is because the Christians basically said homosexuality is an absolute, abomination of whatever. So I've talked to many in the gay community that that's why they probably come to a New Thought church. But some of the comments are, but I have to say I miss the ritual. I said, well, you're not going to get communion out of this particular group here, but there are people who really, really love that ritual, and not just the gay community, but many people they want to be able to have that. So,
Well, and I'll be short, but no.
well,
Metropolitan Community Churches was actually started by a defrocked Pentecostal, okay? So each MCC takes on the nature of kind of the senior minister. So there are some MCCs which are very Bible thumping, and salvation and all of that. The particular one that I went to was not, Darrell had studied to be an Episcopal priest, but when they wouldn't ordain him, then he was ordained within MCC and then Divine Science. But I was just going to share very quickly is that, when I first started coming here, I loved the message, but I had come from, the candles and the robes and the choir and all, and so it came to Easter and Lent, and I was like really missing that,
exactly what I mean.
And so I went away for a little while, if you remember, But I went to, the churches that had the communion, even the more liberal, UCCs and stuff. But it was still too much of that, and not enough of the positive, life-affirming, God, I am God stuff, And so, that's why I've been back to stay.
Okay, one more, and then we'll on to Emma.
I had a very good friend in California that was a CSL practitioner emeritus who went to Catholic Mass every Saturday night because he loved the ritual. He loved it felt so good to him that he was a very dedicated practitioner the rest of the week.
That's funny. Well, I think the one thing we can all agree on tonight is that there is this omnipresence that everyone, it's the thread that I think goes through for all of us. and that is where the healing takes place. I don't think we've not went away from that. The thing is that there's no healing going to take place unless you put spirit, God, good, whatever you want first. And as long as we have duality in any form, then that's the healing takes place in first cause, and call it whatever you want. I think probably the biggest problem we all have is we have too many names for things instead of just the one thing that's happening. And I've realized this week is that the minute I leave the absolute, my life goes to hell. Right here on physically, mentally, whatever. And so I'm really seeing this week because we have a lot of collective consciousness, a lot of distractions in our world right now, pulling, and I'm thinking, and I'm so confused, but I haven't gone anywhere. I'm on the beach and I'm confused. And I'm thinking, well, you're on the beach and you're confused. How could you do that? There's waves coming in. It's because I'm still swimming in consciousness, collective consciousness, of our world. And so you have to unplug. What I call is completely unplug. Not just turn off the radio. That's not that's what we think. Well, I don't even watch the news. Well, baby, you don't need to watch the news because it's called the news is already in the air, baby. It's still going around. So this has been so wonderful.
Thank you
and,
so much.
Thank you so much.
And see, I don't say, I hope you got what you needed. I know that you did.
Exactly. You do. You're wonderful. I just think that's so funny. Treat and move your feet.
You know what I think, though? I think we're going to take our break now.
Yeah.
The reason is because I don't want to get interrupted in the middle of Mary Baker.
Oh, no.
All right. If you
Because
don't.
Mary's coming up. And the Fillmores.